Welcome to the Firebelly Social Show. We're focused on talking to food and beverage brands that are on a mission to make the world better.
Hey everyone, Duncan here with another episode of the Firebelly Social Show, where we chat with founders and leaders of mission-driven food and beverage brands. And thanks for tuning in today. We've got a great show lined up for you around one of my favorite beverages of all time, tea. But before we start, this episode is brought to you by Firebelly Marketing. At Firebelly, we help mission-based food and beverage brands bring people closer through social media marketing. So if you're ready to use social media, give us a call, look us up, fax us, go to our website, firebellymarketing.com to learn more. Now, look, I'm super excited today. So I got Bryon White from Yaupon Brothers, American Tea, and that just sounds good, American Tea. And Bryon, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me, Duncan.
Now, Bryon, you're a pioneer, not just with tea, but with regenerative agriculture. And you're the founder of the company. And correct me if I'm wrong, but tea is the number one food trend for 2023 and 2024 at Whole Foods.
Yeah, specifically Yaupon, which is the type of tea that we grow and make our products from here at Yaupon Brothers. Yeah, thanks for the intro. I really specialize in what we call native food rematriation, which is making really cool, delicious products out of native plant species that occur naturally here in the United States. And Yaupon is one of those. Matter of fact, it is our only native caffeinated plant species.
Yaupon, we're ready. And you're also part of the Builders and Backers, one of the leading VC funds in this space too, right?
Yeah, so I'm a venture builder for Builders and Backers, and my brother Kyle, who co-founded Yaupon Brothers with me, also works for Builders and Backers. He's the head of business development. So I mentor the hundreds of startup entrepreneurs that come through our Idea Accelerator every year, and Kyle goes out and grows the program and expands it. And yeah, it's really a great synergy. You know, we work in CPG and agriculture, and we also get to help out new entrepreneurs who are just getting started in their journey. So it's really fulfilling on both sides of the coin.
That's amazing. Now, look, I'm going to be quoting you here, and I'm in an unusually humorous mood, so you're just going to have to bear with me. But let's kick off the backstory, and let's have you spill the tea on how you went from being just a regular tea drinker to the head honcho of Yaupon Brothers American Tea.
Yeah, sure. Well, I mean, this starts way back, like more than a decade ago in 2012. I'm from Florida, so is my brother, and I've always been a big plant nerd. You know, I'm just into plants, and I think they're awesome, especially native plants. So all throughout my life, I would stumble upon a plant growing somewhere that I thought was interesting, and I would research it and figure out all sorts of interesting facts about it. And that's what happened with Yaupon back in 2011. I found a bunch of it growing across the street from our house, and I just thought it was a really cool plant, you know, really tough, beautiful. Nothing seemed to bother it. We had just had a hurricane come through, and a lot of stuff was killed by it, but this was just doing fine. So I was like, man, this is a really cool tree. And I started researching it, and I found this book called The Black Drink. It was written by an anthropologist named Charles Hudson at the University of Georgia. And this book went into really, you know, extreme detail about the thousands and thousands of years of ethnobotanical heritage that Yaupon has among indigenous cultures here in North America. So in a nutshell, the indigenous people that originally inhabited Florida, in our case, they were called the Timucua, were consuming beverages made from Yaupon every day for 8,000 years, probably longer than that. And I was like, man, this is really cool. You know, this is our only native caffeinated plant species on the entire continent. So everything that we consume in America that's caffeinated is imported except for Yaupon. And I was like, this stuff must really taste like crap, or somebody would have already done it. You know, somebody would already made a product from this. And at the time, there was no commercially available Yaupon products on the market whatsoever. So, you know, we watched some videos on YouTube, figured out how to make the tea, tried all different sorts of ways, forced it on everyone we know. And everybody liked it. Everybody thought it was good. And we were like, man, we're going to get instantly rich off this. Of course, that didn't happen, but we did spend the last more than a decade helping to build an entire supply and value chain from scratch that now produces more than 50,000 pounds of Yaupon a year. So it went from zero to 50,000 pounds in less than a decade. And what we're looking at now is the emergence of a new industry that is based upon a native plant here in the American South. And what that means is that it's evolved to thrive here. It doesn't need fertilizers or pesticides or artificial irrigation. It's just happy to show up. And that creates a very sustainable enterprise that I think is also going to create a lot of economic opportunity here in the American South.
I love that. And I think the key word is sustainable. I think, I was just attending a webinar today about sustainable marketing, and the emphasis is on sustainable, not sustainability. And because that we all know about that. But that leads me to my next question. I mean, let's talk about the regenerative agriculture's role in this whole vision, because you touched on it just now. It's naturally occurring.
Yeah, it is. I mean, and we approach it from the perspective is that what we cultivate is a native plant, meaning that there is no injury to the soil health or the natural biome, because we're really taking conventional farmland and restoring it into productive natural habitat that we are also using for commercial purposes. So in this example, all of this economic growth and cool industry that we're building is not mutually exclusive from environmental conservation or sustainable practices. They exist hand in hand, and that's very intentional. So like a Yaupon farm, for instance, there's birds living in the trees, there's pollinators feeding off of the flowers, there's animals eating the fruit. It's providing habitat and food for all the wildlife around. It's restoring nutrients to the soil. It's stopping erosion from the soil being altered. So in this example, it's not necessarily the same as like a permaculture operation growing, a lot of different fruits and vegetables in a regenerative way. We're approaching it from our crop is native and we're also organic, so we're not injuring the soil health or the natural ecosystem.
And Yaupon is causing quite a stir in the beverage scene. What sets it apart, I guess, from the usual suspects like coffee or traditional tea, or even yerba mate, for that example? Is it the flavor? Is it the history, or the coolness, or all of the above?
Yeah, I mean, Yaupon's related to yerba mate. They're in the same family, but yerba mate is from South America.
Okay.
And Yaupon is from North America. It's endemic to the American Southeast. So I think what really sets it apart is that it is the only caffeinated plant native to the United States in all of North America. So everything that we're consuming that's caffeinated in this country, whether it's tea or coffee or yerba mate or guarana or guayusa, you name it, it's all imported from somewhere else. And if we're going to use the example of tea, which is Camellia sinensis, we're importing into this country over 250,000 tons every single year. And on average, we're moving that material 7,000 or 8,000 miles to get here. And when it gets here, you dunk it in hot water for 5 minutes and then you throw it right in the trash. So it's like an extreme example of wasteful consumerism. We have to transport this material from very far away in order to get here. And that happens to be the case for the vast, vast majority of all of the caffeine that we consume in America. It's either imported from far away or it's, synthetic crap that has been made in a lab somewhere. And that's sort of the option. Now you have the option of Yaupon, which is natural caffeine that is grown right here in the US, and it's made and evolved to thrive here. So it's sort of like America's tea. That's our answer to tea. And I think that's the thing that really sets it apart. And of course, there is a really cool historical component. There's a lot of health benefits to consuming Yaupon that you don't get from other caffeine sources as well.
That's super cool to think that we're drinking something that, people on this continent have been drinking for 8,000 years. That's as an idea that I love. Speaking of
Yeah.
which, your collaboration with the North American traditional indigenous food systems is fascinating. Could you share a little bit about how that partnership contributes to the preservation of indigenous food traditions?
Yeah, sure. I mean, so I'm not an indigenous person, and we try to be conscious of that, right? That we are from Florida, which was in our case the homeland of the Timucua, and the Timucua are extinct. So that race and culture of people no longer exists, hasn't existed in more than 200 years. And really, the fact that people are still blissfully unaware of Yaupon is a direct consequence of the erasure of indigenous culture in America. So Yaupon is part of that disturbing history that I think we have to face as a nation, that, we did commit genocide and cultural erasure in America. And one of the consequences for that was that we lost a lot of knowledge specifically pertaining to foodways. So I met Sean Sherman several years ago now, I think back at least 5 years ago, and he was working on his cookbook then called The Sous Chef. And what he was doing was rebuilding and rediscovering indigenous foodways and indigenous cuisine all throughout North America. And really, a central part of what we've been building here at Yaupon Brothers is a reestablishment of these old traditional food systems that historically were highly successful for thousands of years. So this is examining our current food system as being kind of stupid and wasteful, and saying, well, we have other things that we could consume that are not novelties, by the way, that are delicious, are nutritious, that could be packaged and marketed in a way that appeals to customers on a broad scale. And that's really what we were trying to prove in concept with Yaupon. And we saw a good synergy with what Natives was doing, which was trying to rebuild those same indigenous foodways. And we really just wanted to support it. So the relationship evolved as like, we don't want anything in return. We just want to support you in your work to rebuild these native food systems. And I think that's blossomed into a really cool relationship. And now Sean Sherman opened Awamni in Minneapolis, which is one of the top 10 restaurants in America, serving all indigenous cuisine that's originally from North America. And we're very proud to say that our Yaupon is on the menu there, and also at the Indigenous Food Lab, which is like his retail location in Minneapolis.
That's tremendous. Let's talk a little bit about Yaupon itself. What are some of the kind of, I guess, stats around it? I was reading that it has less caffeine, but is a healthier drink in general.
It has about a third less caffeine than coffee, but it has a higher theobromine to caffeine ratio and a lot of other things going on that are complicated. But really, in general, what that means is that drinking a lot of Yaupon doesn't result in like a crash or jitters. It's a very smooth, uplift that keeps you going all day without making you feel gross and weird, like you can when you drink too much coffee, or in my case, like a Celsius. Like I'm to the point now where I have to drink like 500 milligrams of caffeine a day. So sometimes I need like that big hit of caffeine, but Yaupon is really nice for just drinking all throughout the day and even into the evening, because it does keep you pepped up, but it doesn't make you feel, like you're on meth. Like I feel like that's how coffee is. You drink too much of it, and it just makes you feel so weird and strung out. And Yaupon for certain doesn't do that.
Yeah. I was discovering polyphenols with Chris Conway's founder of Happy Being, and polyphenols are extremely prevalent in Yaupon.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they are. I mean, it's part of the whole antioxidant array that is not just present in Yaupon, but also tea. But why we bring it up is to say, hey, we're not saying that from a polyphenolic or antioxidant content perspective that Yaupon is healthier than tea, but it's at least just as good. And it's not imported. So you get all the health benefits from drinking tea. You also get from drinking Yaupon, with the added benefit of, that it comes from here. It's a transparent supply chain. that you can touch and see and be a part of, as opposed to tea being produced in India or East Africa. You have no idea how it's grown or what the process is like. And what we tell people a lot is that if you did see that, most times you wouldn't want to accept it. Like most of the tea industry has really extreme poverty that it's benefiting from. That's what helps keep the prices low. And there are good tea companies that don't do that. But by and large, the big industrial giants, which most tea in America is controlled by 8 large companies, by the way. And in the case of those companies, most of that tea is being produced in a standard of poverty that we would not accept for ourselves or our friends. And with Yaupon, you don't ever have to worry about that, because you can walk right into our farms and our factories and you can just see it for yourself.
That's really interesting. Those economics are really interesting, and I'm sure that most people don't think about that. I guess, what's it been like for you, as you and your brother as founders? What's that journey been like for you? How are you taking care of yourself? What's happening?
Yeah, it's a mess. I mean, it is. It's like it's very rewarding and fulfilling, but it's definitely the hardest thing we've ever done. And I think it's getting harder, right? There's so much noise to cut through now, and there are a lot of tools of the trade and things that make it easier to reach out and share our products with people. But those tools are available to everyone. So I feel like there's just more and more and more noise to cut through, and it's expensive and difficult. I think that venture capital has really done a really great job of messing up the whole entire economy, especially from a startup standpoint, to where now it's really difficult to get started, even if you know what you're doing and you can demonstrate, a viable investment from their perspective. It's just so difficult to raise money right now. And I think that's putting a real damper on the entire startup economy. So I love being an entrepreneur. I would have it no other way. I'm lucky to also have builders and backers to allow me to share what I've learned with others. But aside from that, it is definitely not for everyone. And it is a really, really, really difficult thing to accomplish and do well. And I think it requires, a high degree of mental toughness and also emotional intelligence in order to pull it off in the right way. And that's definitely something that I don't think I had getting started. I had to acquire it over time. And I really do believe the only way you can learn how to be an entrepreneur is to just be one. Like going to school for it and stuff. Go ahead, but you're in for a hard lesson either way. So,
especially since entrepreneurship, a lot of times entrepreneurship programs are taught by people that haven't been entrepreneurs for very long. And
yeah.
so, you're learning from the worst people to learn from. So a beautiful,
I agree.
beautifully said. No other way to learn entrepreneurship than just be an entrepreneur. That is
exactly. It's kinesthetic. And there are things you can learn from, a college course like in the business realm that I think are very, very useful skills as an entrepreneur. But just because you understand business or finance or accounting does not make you an entrepreneur. It's actually the ability to juggle a generalized understanding of all of those things. I think it's very much a jack of all trades, master of none type situation. But it's understanding how to sell the dream that you're building, how to build a team around that, and just having a high enough degree of executive function to push those really ambitious goals through the pipe. And that's been hard for me because I'm like, ADHD, unorganized, just highly distractible human being. And I've really had to nail myself down in order to realize success. And I did that with the help of a whole lot of other people who would like sit me down and say, you need to, shut the fuck up for a minute and like understand how you're going to bring this thing across the finish line. It's like, can you manage a project? Can you close a deal? Can you organize a team and keep them focused? And those things are not easy for anyone. But they're all really necessary skills as an entrepreneur, especially if you're trying to scale a business.
And you are spitting wisdom, man. It is a difficult time to be a startup. I think it's difficult time to be in food and beverage, like small companies, food and beverage in general. I was talking to David Mesa from We Grow CPG, kind of like a sales consultancy. Getting companies to the right place with sales. And what's interesting about what he said was that everyone he's talking to at large retailers is saying that they're going to cut their SKUs, by 70%. And also like less new things, and so that's the different numbers.
I think there's a lot of buying decisions at retail right now that are favoring nostalgia. So consumers are signaling that they want products that remind them of products they had when they were kids, which kind of flies in the face of all the innovation that has been occurring over the last decade or so. But I think the really big problem right now for startup founders, especially in food and beverage and CPG, is really just the capital landscape. I mean, I don't know how people are raising money right now unless they're very well connected and respected. But institutional money is just not flowing for food and beverage and CPG. It's still doing some things for tech, but even tech is drying up. I mean, I think there's just a big bubble and a massive course correction. And I've been critical of VC for so long, that this is nothing new for me to just talk trash about it. And I know that's the easy thing to do. I say that recognizing that it is an integral part of the holistic economy. VC serves an important purpose, but I think there's been a lot of misalignment in the last several decades where really bad investments have been made. A high rate of failure has been tolerated or even expected. And I think that's over. That game is over, personally. Yeah. So I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know how we're going to get money. I don't know how other food and beverage and CPG founders are going to raise money from institutional sources. I think we're going to have to get really innovative and scrappy in order to figure that out. And we will. It'll get figured out eventually. I don't have the answer on the tip of my tongue today.
Yeah, I've seen, some founders that have come on the podcast, out and about talking about, grassroots funding, alternate, kind of community funding. Some people just kind of like pulling back from retail and, just relying on their own audience and running very lean operations so they can still enjoy comfortable lives, but they're not under the, pressure to grow. I mean, and candidly, like that seems kind of counter to everything we've heard, right, about being an entrepreneur, right? You should have to grow. You can't plateau. You can't focus on increasing your margins. You just got to increase your revenues and automatically increase your profits. So I think that there's great points that you make about how, and maybe we'll see innovation in unexpected places, right?
I think we're going to have to. I mean, the issue with CPG in general, in my opinion, is that it's very expensive to get started. And so it kind of limits your options as to where you're going to take it. I mean, food is a volume business. You have to sell a lot in order to make enough money to pay your bills and keep your lights on. And also, it is very costly to stand up a CPG brand, and even costlier if you're going to take it to retail. I do think that there's an emerging school of thought that favors retail expansion over direct consumer expansion. And I do believe the reason for that is because retail expansion is a clearer pathway to scale. Whereas D2C is anyone's best guess. It's become so expensive. You don't know what your ROI is going to be on your ad spend. And you could easily vaporize all your money and get no return. And I think that's less and less attractive. So like with our business, for instance, we've chosen to focus our efforts on building out our retail expansion as a land grab and sort of just maintaining our D2C presence as like a brand loyalty exercise, a way to engage directly with our customers, keep them happy. So that's sort of the trend that I have been seeing more and more of in food and bev, is actually a return to retail, which I think flies counter to what happened during COVID when so much retail shut down and everybody was focusing on direct consumer because everybody was at home and that's where they were shopping. But that's really reversed course like very quickly in the past 2 years, where there's been a big return to retail. But to your point, I mean, there's so much bad advice. It's like you don't even know what to believe. The whole landscape is dominated by this cognitive dissonance from people who will tell you to do this, and then you go to another one. And I mean, pitching to investors right now is, I swear, one will say, no, we're not into it because we think you should do it this way. And then you'll pitch to another one an hour later, and they'll tell you the exact opposite. So there's very little surface to grab onto to understand your bearings and where you should go, because there's tons of bad advice. Most of it is not actionable or valuable, and it leaves you just kind of guessing, But if I had to make a recommendation to founders, I would say probably the smartest thing right now is to focus on retail expansion and understand that there's always two pathways. You could not take any investor capital. You could build a lifestyle business that sort of just supports you or your family. And you could do local events and farmers markets and sell to a handful of your local retailers. Or you can take, investor money, which basically at some point forces you to some sort of an exit. And I feel like if you take that second option, that investor money, you have to scale. There's no other alternative, because those investors gave you money with the anticipation that they would receive a return. And the way that they receive a return is you scaling business and probably exiting eventually. So I do think that there is like a divergence at some point. We have to decide to be a lifestyle business or scale the business. Yeah.
And there's nothing wrong with either. I mean, I think
No, absolutely not.
It's a question of, which one you want to pursue and, what you want to do. I mean, I'm so curious to see similarly what happens, with the alcohol-free movement, that seems to be blowing up. But again, like I've heard all the hype and I've bought into the hype, and then I'm hearing some interesting kind of counter points, from people that are selling on premise and saying, hey, the on-premise story is different, so which is part of what the people are saying, which is, hey, the on-premise people don't get it. But so, there's just all different perspectives. Let me ask you this. Yeah. How does social, with us being social people, how does social play into your own brand's story and success?
I think for us, it's been a really great way to communicate directly with our customers and to engage with them in a meaningful way. And that creates a very human element that I think people crave. Everybody wants authenticity these days, and they so rarely get it. So like we make an effort to respond to every comment, or, really engage with our users in a way that's meaningful. And that's ever evolving. I mean, we have a personal brand and a business brand on LinkedIn, for instance, that's very much about our business activities and our economic growth and all of this. And then we have more consumer-facing presence on Instagram and now TikTok, for example. And I'm of the generation where TikTok is just, I don't know, it's just beyond me a little bit. It's like I feel like for younger people, but I obviously do believe there's a huge opportunity there, and we want to meet our customers where they're at. So we have launched out a TikTok shop, and we have an agency helping us with that called Local Way, which is like a creator aggregator, which is really interesting. And they're actually a portfolio company of builders and backers. I didn't know what to expect, but I've been pleasantly surprised on our turns on TikTok. So people buy our stuff on TikTok. I didn't really know what would happen there, but it's been fairly successful so far. So sometimes there are pleasant surprises. And one other area where we've seen a lot of growth is on Amazon. And I personally not a huge fan of Amazon as a vendor. I think they're harsh, but consumers love buying stuff on Amazon, including me. I mean, I buy stuff on Amazon all the time. So you can't fight it. It's part of a system that's just picking up speed, no matter how we feel about it. So we went from selling just a couple cases a week on Amazon to selling pallets a week on Amazon. And now that's where we're at. So we have, several thousand customers on there that love our products, and we do very well. So, we try to be on the innovative side of things, even though that may not be where I'm personally comfortable. That's where I think we should try to position ourselves.
I think that's kind of part of the vibe of social. Me personally, heading up our company and then advising other owners and leaders that, I mean, social comes with a sort of like built-in unease at times. It's not the perfect picture. It's not the video that you imagined, but yet everyone's reacting to it or responding to it in a positive way.
Yeah.
So I think that's part. I had a question for you. So is there a canned, ready to drink Yaupon in the near future?
There have been a couple, and Yaupon Brothers largely not super involved with most of them because we're really not an ingredient business. So we have not ever launched our own ready to drink. I think personally, RTD is where most of the market is, but it's very scary. It's like a very competitive and cutthroat and expensive. And we've just not been able to figure out how to approach that. Not yet anyway. But there have been a couple of beverages now. I know one is Rambler Energy in Austin, Texas. They have a Yaupon derived sort of carbonated energy drink that's pretty good. I've had that one. There's another one that's called Greenbelt Kombucha. They're based in Austin as well. So they're both kind of commercially available. There's a new one I saw coming out soon, but I don't think it's out yet. That's a canned Yaupon derived energy drink. And then we have collaborated mostly on the alcoholic beverage side. So we did create a beer for Edmunds Oast with Edmunds Oast, which is a brewery in Charleston, South Carolina. And we also did a beer with Playa Brewing that is in the summertime sold at Epcot in Disney World. And that's like the Florida beer that people buy when they go around and get, drink all day at Epcot. So we have done cool collaborations like that. But I think the market is ripe for Yaupon RTD. It's just a really, really hard business, and there is a finite supply of Yaupon available. So it's not, there's not really a reliable extract yet on the market. So that makes it a little bit difficult to make energy drinks. For instance, they basically have to be brewed. But I do think that will all change with time. The industry is maturing, and with that comes other form factors of the plants that are going to be suitable for RTD all over the map. I think it's a good thing. These other companies that are doing it, they're not related to us, but I think that we all help each other. We're just creating more Yaupon customers at this point. So.
Well, let me ask you this. Out of all your products, what are your favorites, or, just talk us through some of them?
Yeah. So we have 6 mainstream products. My favorite is the American Green because that's just straight up delicious Yaupon with nothing added. They're all certified organic, so you don't have to worry about, gross crap being in there that's harmful for you. The most popular one besides the green is probably the lavender coconut. It's a very unusual flavor, but it's really tasty. That one was an editor's pick in Bon Appetit magazine. So I highly recommend that one. The green was featured in Men's and Women's Health as their best new tea for both men and women's health. That was 2023. The Florida chai is like, a standard masala chai, but using Yaupon instead of tea. The fire roasted is sort of based on the way that indigenous cultures here in Florida would have prepared it for ceremonial use. So it has a little bit of smokiness to it. It's still very light, but really nice. We have a peppermint called Revive Mint, and then we are very soon, like in the next month, launching a new one that is spiced peach.
Ooh, spiced peach. And what's the story with that? Where will that launch?
Well, good question. I don't know which retailers will pick that up yet, but I'm really hoping that a lot of them do. And it is just a really juicy, summery flavor that we have been wanting to do for a long time. We've rolled it out on a seasonal basis for a couple of years, and it's been really, really popular. So we're going to bring it out full time. Yeah.
Super cool. What are your thoughts on the loose leaf side of things? Is that a part of your business that you see getting much action, or is that something that'll happen in the future?
I have mixed feelings about it. So, like, we do offer loose leaf Yaupon on our website. We don't typically offer it at retail. And that is a direct reaction to the feedback that we receive from our own customers who mostly seem to prefer tea bags. So I know that there is a lot of movement toward loose leaf, especially in the past couple of years. I think a lot of it is based on two things, in my opinion. One of them being value, and the other one being sustainability. And on the sustainability side, our tea bag paper doesn't have any non-compostable plastic in it. So I think a lot of consumers are concerned about plastic, microplastics in the tea bag paper, and our tea paper doesn't have it. So you don't have to worry about that. And then secondly, in terms of value, we use the same exact material inside of our tea bags as we use in our loose leaf. So there is zero difference between the loose leaf tea and what's in the tea bags. And I think a lot of tea drinkers consider tea bag tea to be an inferior product. And mostly it is in terms of tea, but with Yaupon, it isn't. It's exactly the same.
That's interesting that you said mostly it is. Yeah. I mean, I think I know with tea from India and drinking tea in India, you can always tell who the tea aficionado is, because the tea aficionado, or the obsessive tea drinker, is going to go for the customization that you can get with loose leaf, because they're going to decide how much to use. And really, it's interesting because there's such a wide array of opinions on tea bags, but I just think tea bags work.
They work. And I mean, in America, consumers really crave convenience and speed. And loose tea doesn't lend itself to either of those things, because you have to have your equipment and it's a mess to clean up afterwards. And it's a process for like taking a little bit of time and like sitting down with it and, intentionally taking a moment. And I think that as a society, we have a really hard time doing that. But that doesn't mean that we should be deprived of, this healthy drink that makes us feel good and keeps us happy. So we really offer it in tea bags because that's how most of our consumers want to consume it, and want to give the people what they want. So we don't want to pollute the environment or be bad for people's health, which is why we really did a lot of work to make sure that our tea paper does not have those harmful microplastic fibers in it. So our entire tea paper is compostable. You're not putting all of that stuff in your body and not putting it into the earth. So that was a really important thing for us to figure out.
So what about Bryon? How do you take care of yourself?
I like a lot of entrepreneurs that I know. I'm just like a hyperactive person. So I'm like, running or swimming or surfing or, putting on some records or messing around in my garden or playing with my son or I like to buy art, and I have a farm, obviously. So that takes up a ton of my time taking care of the farm. So I stay active. I mean, I think you have to stay active. And, so many of us in this country assume a sedentary lifestyle. And I do think that that's really just not good for our health, for our mental health and our physical health. So I really do try to do something active every day. You know, if I can't go for a run or swim, at least go for a walk, push a kid around in a stroller, anything, just to get outside and enjoy nature is what I like to do best.
That's super cool. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast today. But I think more importantly, I say this to all our founders that have come on here. Thank you for making the world a better place with your vision and, bringing Yaupon to the people and honoring these ancient, food and beverage systems and contributing and the work you're doing to plant the trees. Thank you so much for all of that.
Hey, thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
So let's remind people where they can find and buy the product.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Well, if you're in the Northeast and the Mid-Atlantic, you can get us at Mom's Organic Markets. If you're in the Southeast, especially Florida, you can find us at Whole Foods. If you're in Southern California, we're available at Lassen's. And we're soon going to be available in Colorado at King Supers. And we're available in the Midwest and Great Lakes region through Better Health, and about 500 independent retailers throughout the country. You can also find it on our website, which is yauponbrothers.com. And if you really have to, you can get it on Amazon.
Don't get it on Amazon. No, buy it direct. Thank you so much, Bryon. It's been a fascinating conversation, and I look forward to having you as a guest again sometime. And we wish you the best with everything and your innovation and all your great thinking. Thank you, everyone, for listening to another episode of the Firebelly Social Show, where we shine our lights on leaders and founders of mission-driven food and beverage companies. And this has certainly been a fascinating conversation. We'll see you on the next one.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks for listening to the Firebelly Social Show. We'll see you again next time, and be sure to click subscribe to get future episodes.